Okay, hello, this is Trey Morrison with Moving Abroad with Children, and I have with me via Skype Jen Miller. Hi, Jen.
Hello.
And she has an excellent website with her husband Tony called adventure.com.
Yeah,
EDVENTURE.
Adventure Project is
Oh,
what it is, the whole thing.
there you go.
That's okay.
Stand corrected, Adventure. And I know on your website it mentioned that in 2008 you sold almost all your stuff, but didn't really mention it all. So how did you get to that point?
Well, it took about 2 years of active planning. We decided that we would go and take this trip in 2006, and then it took us 2 years to get to the point where we really could disconnect and do so for a variety of reasons. From the fact that when we made the decision, our youngest was 2 and still not potty trained, and we wanted to do a cycling adventure, so there was kind of a learning curve there for him. Down to just, remodeling our house and all the things that go with owning a home and having 2 cars and a real job and a life in America. And so it took us a couple of years to kind of downsize and get to the point where we were ready to go. And we just set a date 2 years out randomly as the 1st of April 2008, and we went. We actually were out a couple of months ahead of that, so it was kind of cool.
So it was a whole plan for, it wasn't,
Yeah.
some people were like last minute, I'm out of here, and 2 months later they're gone, but you had a 2 year of like, this is what we're going to do, let's systematically work towards it.
Yeah, my husband is a planner for sure. He's not Mr. Spontaneity. At that point, he wasn't. And he had not traveled a whole lot before we took off. I grew up in a family that traveled, so for me there were not less scary, I guess, but just fewer unknowns. But for him, it was really important to have everything planned out. And, from a financial perspective, we have 4 kids. We're not going to put them at peril in any way. And so it was really important to us to have those things planned and organized. And then, of course, what we learned is the best laid plans often go awry, because then the market crashed in October of 2008, and all of our planning for 2 years, all the money that we had saved was gone overnight. But that's a whole other story.
Oh, God, yeah. that hadn't happened yet, though.
No, we didn't know. So we were doing our best to plan. And then we took off with our bicycles. And that first year we rode our bikes from London, England to Africa and back.
From London, England to Africa and back. Like down to Morocco?
Yeah, there were some ferries in there.
Yeah, here and there. So what was your inspiration? Was it just to expose your kids to the world, your issues with the political system in the U.S., or what were your primary motivations to do something like that?
Well, we'd always known that we wanted to travel a lot with our children, and from the time they were little, we have traveled, but we always maintained a home base. When they got old enough, basically we said when we got everybody potty trained, then we could feel like we could really travel. Because for me, changing diapers and tents is just not fun over the long haul.
Been there, done that.
So we were just, it was the earliest point at which we could go, and so we wanted to. And at that point, the age range for our children was 5 through 11, which is a pretty big developmental range. And we wanted to get out there and do some of these things before they were in high school, because we didn't know how they would feel about it, whether they would want to, be in one place for their teen years, or whether they'd want to keep going. And we really treated it only as a gap year. We expected to be gone for 1 year and then to come back and have a real life, quote unquote, real life,
whatever
after
that
that.
means. So you kept your home back in the States, during that first. So you sold it. So when you took off, yeah,
we sold it, but we expected to just be gone a year and then to come back and do something. We didn't know what, but something.
So what? So you, to fund your trip, you mostly saved up. You said, do you make money online, or how do you fund your travels now?
We do now. That stock market crash got our attention. Yeah. We had saved money for that first year and intended to just travel the year and then have regular jobs after that. When the stock market crashed, we were in Italy, and overnight literally had nothing. So we had to figure out if we were going to go home immediately and try to get jobs. Tony's previous employer would have taken him back for up to 2 years at the same rate that he had been if he'd wanted that.
Nice.
Or whether we were going to just, knuckle down and figure it out. And so what we ended up deciding was to go to Africa, where we knew we could live cheaply for a little while. And we started really working on developing our freelance possibilities. He reconfigured his whole career, called in every contact that he had looking for work, learned to do iPhone and Android programming. I got serious about my freelance writing, and what we discovered is that we could, in fact, fund ourselves and keep going. So over the past 5 years, it's been up and down, and freelancing is always this kind of tenuous tightrope thing. But, 5 years later, we are making more money than we did at a static job in the United States, and working about 20 hours a week and doing the things that we want to do instead of the things that we felt maybe we had to do in other incarnations.
That's awesome. You hear that, everybody watching this. People are, one of the people's biggest thing is that, I can't afford it, and how could,
Yeah.
I think when you put yourself in a situation, where suddenly you have to, like, I guess where your money ran out, you're like, okay, suddenly, yeah, freelancing and reconfiguring, you're going to make it work, because especially when you have kids, it's going to happen.
Well, yeah, and I mean, at the time it was terrifying, and we were down to living on our credit cards, which is not our preference, obviously.
Obviously.
And at that time, it doesn't feel like a blessing to have everything you worked for 2 years ripped out from under you, when literally all you have over your head is then a tent because you sold your house.
Oh.
But in retrospect, that was probably the best thing that could have happened to us, because it completely shook up our plan. Without that, we would have probably worked our plan, done our year, gone home, done whatever it is that we did. But as a result of the crash and everything financially being destroyed, we realized that, well, it was actually cheaper for us to live elsewhere. We could make money in the first world and spend it in the second or third world and have a much more comfortable lifestyle that required less work, less hours put in. So that gave us more time with our kids to do the things that we wanted to do. And it was kind of all of those things together, combined with my husband just finally saying, I just don't feel like I'm done with the travel as we got to the end of that year. So I just don't feel like I'm done. And so we just decided to keep going. And the kids love it. And they are really probably the most enthusiastic members of the travel team now. And either they've all got their own goals and dreams as they become teenagers, and we're reconfiguring some things to include what they want to do instead of just, what we had planned to do. And so now it's this open-ended, ongoing thing that could take us anywhere.
Yeah, it's up in the air. So how do you do schooling? Do you homeschool everybody?
Yes, we do. We were homeschoolers before, so that
Okay.
wasn't a big switch for them when we moved onto the road. They have, I could talk for hours about education, but yes, we're not unschoolers. They have a very specific plan that they're following. That we have very high standards for their educations. Our oldest is, she's completely finished. She's been working with Oregon State University now by online for a year. She's the one that's turning 17. And then the boys are all still working on their high school and junior high work, and it goes fine. They can school wherever they happen to be.
Yeah, we've written a lot about the online education these days, and how, you can almost get a better education in a lot of ways. It's really just amazing. You can move at your own pace. You don't have to be stuck with the lowest common denominator. And obviously, I can talk a lot about education as well. So,
yeah.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to say, I think I'm not anti-public school. I used to be a teacher. I think there's definitely a place for that. There are people who kind of get on a soapbox and crusade about how homeschooling is always better. I don't think it is always better, but for many, many children, it can be better. And certainly in our situation, it has allowed our children the best of both worlds. I don't think that you have to compromise the level of an intellectual education for a real-world life experience education as well. And for us, that breaks down to roughly they spend their mornings doing bookwork and things intensively, and we have afternoons for other things. And because of the flexibility of our schedule, they can work intensively for 3 weeks and take 2 months off if we have to be off the grid somewhere. And so, the flexibility and the amazing explosion of what's available on the internet has just changed the educational game. And I think smart parents, whether they send their kids to school or not, are hip to that and are making use of it.
Yeah, it's changing so fast. It's just it's mind-boggling. It really is. The one. We've never done homeschooling. We've thought about it. We're like, I don't know if I could do it. And I have many friends who thought they couldn't. And once they start, like, actually, it's great. It's not that big a deal. It's not, you have to be, I'm not worried I'm not disciplined enough. But one of the fears I know I hear other people talk about, and I would worry about, is just the social aspect. As far as your kids developing relationships, especially as they become teenagers, boyfriends, girlfriends. And when you move a lot, I know in Panama, it's difficult because you get friends with the family and you hang out, and you have to have a lot of goodbyes, with people that you've grown close to in a short amount of time. So how have you guys dealt with that?
That is true. I just wrote about this week, and my daughter has written some about it as well.
Oh, cool.
My first answer is that as a teacher, that school is an artificial social environment. When in your life do you spend 8 hours a day with 20 people of exactly your age and experience?
True.
So the idea that we have all adopted that school is normal for socialization is actually, it's only something normal that's been created within the last 4 or 5 generations. Previous to that, people grew up in situations where they were living and working in a much wider age range from birth right through. And so I think the absence of school is not a social detractor. Now, from the perspective of them forming relationships, that's obviously very important, and we work really hard at that. And we got a little bit of criticism one time on this point, and this guy had written something to the effect of, well, your kids can't really form real friendships because you just drag them around so much. And I read this to my kids, and they had a fit. They said, excuse me, back up the truck. We can't have real friendships. We have lots of real friendships. And they started rattling them off. And of course, they were spread across 4 continents. You know? So they're not people that they're, having playgroup with 3 times a week or something like that. But yesterday morning, they were on Skype with their best friends in New Hampshire, and they talk every day with 5 or 6 different families that are on different continents. And again, technology becomes our best friend in the same way that it has with education, that we have the opportunity to be face-to-face with people privately that we wouldn't have had the ability to. For instance, when I was a kid and we were traveling, I remember standing in the line for the one telephone in central Mexico in a village, and then getting there 3 hours later when it was our turn to find that the line had been cut and we couldn't actually make the one phone call for 3 months to our grandmother. That was the reality when I was a kid traveling. I had no social contacts at home, but now it's a completely different ballgame. And they even have, friends among the children of the other traveling families that we meet with occasionally in Penang or in Australia or here or wherever, that they get to have these kind of weird traveling family kid play dates with children that they've known online for a long time, and then they meet in the real world, and then their relationships go back online. And I don't know. I think technology is changing the game where relationships are concerned.
It really is. I mean, I think it's true. I mean, I have some of the same memories of you. I remember being in Andorra at one point. It was like my grandmother's birthday, and it was just this whole day saga to see if we could find some way to contact her and find a way to make a phone call. It was a whole day just to try and communicate. I can't remember, and waiting in line for the payphone. I remember that, and you pick the phone up and they're talking a language you don't understand. I'm like, what? I don't know what's going on here.
Yeah. And now we've got our blogs. Our parents never go 2 days without knowing what's going on with their grandchildren.
Yeah.
And so, it's a much closer. And the other side of it is that we make time to be in places and let them form relationships. We lived for 6 months in Guatemala. We lived for 6 months in Thailand. We've been in New Zealand here for 6 months. And I think for people who take a gap year and travel around the world, they tend to move fast because they got to check all the stuff off the list, right?
Yeah.
Well, when you slow down and it becomes your lifestyle, that kind of travel is tiring. And you don't, move forward every 3 days for 5 years on end. Part of the reason that we're traveling is for the educational benefit of our kids, and we really value the experience of slowing down and living in a place and going deep instead of just wide for a while, and forming relationships within a community and building those communities in various places for our kids. And I think there's a lot of richness that comes from that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And then we still have communities in the States and Canada that we consider home, where we hit back to every now and then. And we'll be several months in North America this coming winter, and the kids are already planning with their friends there all the things they're going to do when they're home.
Yeah, it's great that they can actually plan. I know even when my kids were younger, I guess they didn't have the ability to really use the technology, and they would come back to school. They've been gone for 2 years, and now they're in second grade. No one remembers who they are anymore.
Yeah.
And now that they're getting older, my daughter's on Google Hangout all the time with her friends, and and they're playing ping pong with their heads and stuff. I don't know what they do.
Yeah, my kids take a class that's completely online, and they do it via Google Hangout every Monday night. They're on there with a bunch of other kids from all over the place that all take the same class, and they have their class time face to face, which just cracks me up. I love it.
And it goes both ways. Actually, a friend of mine in Panama, she's a tutor. She teaches. She's Canadian, and she's able to tutor kids in Canada, like you were saying.
Yeah.
She can earn in Canada and she can spend in Panama, which is not a bad way to go.
No. Yeah, well, and I think, where the financial aspect of things is concerned, if people can figure out how to leverage that, the internet and the connectivity, and form their business online, and keep their clients in their country of origin, then you have no issues with working visas, and the whole process becomes so much simpler.
So you mentioned, since they only go to school, it only takes a small part of your day, you end up with a lot of free time during the day. So how does your quality of life compare, do you feel like, now versus probably back in the States where you didn't have as much free time? Has it brought you tighter as a family?
We were a little spoiled even when we lived in the States. My husband has worked from home since our 15-year-old was 6 months old. He worked for Apple, and he covered a large percentage of the United States for them. And so we ate breakfast, lunch, and dinner together most days anyway, and his office was in the house. So I don't know if I'm really a great person to ask about that transition. We have, from the time our children were babies, structured for family life first and figured out how to sort the funding around that. And that's just our
Yeah,
our
that makes
personal
sense. I mean,
choice.
there's different stories out there. Some people were working the high-powered 70-hour-a-week jobs, and then actually
Yeah.
my partner Coley, and he just one day just it finally hit him. He's like, I quit and sold everything, moved to Panama with his 2 and 4-year-old. And
Good for him.
it was from one extreme to the other, which is tricky. But I think my situation was more similar to yours. I mean, I have a restaurant and I manage property rentals, and I was able to manage my affairs from Panama. But it's always been, I haven't had a real job. As my wife says, the job. We usually spell it out because it's such a four letter word in our house. Like, no, not a job.
Yeah. Well, in my family, I was raised very kind of outside the box. My dad has not, in my memory, held a job that required him to be out of the house. So for our particular gene pool, this is not unusual. And so we forget, I think, sometimes how funny it seems to other people, and how, wow, strange it is that we would live the way we do. Because within our family, it's not strange at all. My brother spent 5 years sailing around the world after he graduated from college. My parents have been just about every place. Yeah, so for us, it's just sort of the expected thing. You grow up, you go your own way. My dad, I think, would be pretty disappointed in us if we went the JOB route, because he credits us with a little more creativity and ingenuity than that. And he hopes for the grandchildren the same, I'm sure.
So obviously living this kind of lifestyle, obviously it's not all roses. Can you share any thoughts you have on any of the negatives or the hard bits?
Yeah, well, I hate hand washing in hostel showers for 6 people.
For 6 people.
I hate
One thing
hand
for
washing
yourself.
in rivers for 6 people. I hate potty training people on chicken bus toilets. There's a lot of things that we really don't love. I hate it when people get concussions in strange countries and you have to figure out healthcare in a language you don't speak. I hate it when you get to a hospital in Guatemala when your kid's cut the end of his finger off and find they don't have a suture kit in the whole dang hospital.
Oh,
I mean, there's all these things that we tell people our life is exactly like everybody else's. It just happens in more places and more languages. And when things go bad, they just are exponentially more annoying to deal with.
So what do you guys do for health? Do you have health insurance? Do you have a global policy of some sort? I imagine.
Absolutely, yeah, we do. We travel with health insurance. And with what do they call it? Evac insurance, where they'll airlift you out if you're, if you, like my friend last week, one of the single mom traveling families that we know, her kid fell off a horse in outer Mongolia, dislocated his shoulder and broke his arm. They were airlifted over a 6-day period. It took them 6 days to get them all the way out to Hong Kong, where they could fix her kid. $200,000. Yes, get travel insurance.
Holy
period.
cow.
End of story. Don't ever travel without it, especially if you have kids. So yeah, we definitely have it.
What is there a certain company you recommend that's worked well for you guys?
There are a bunch. We happen to use World Nomads. If you're really going to be living out of the country expat style, there's a company called IMG that I think is probably slightly better because they cover you in the States as well. Ours only covers outside the United States. If you do, it really, what you get for travel insurance depends a lot on where you live. World Nomads is great for Americans. It's very prohibitively expensive for a lot of other people. Because for them to travel, they have to cover the United States, and the United States is an extremely expensive place in terms of medical care. So a lot depends on where you call home and what your point of origin is. But do some research. There's lots of options, and it's really, by American standards, not expensive. Yeah,
I know. We interviewed a couple the other day. I think they were in Argentina, and the amount of money they saved on health insurance covers their entire lifestyle. They were paying $2,000 a month. For insurance in the U.S., and now they're living on $2,000 a month. Just that one bill change is funded their whole lifestyle.
Yeah, it's shocking. It really is. We had great insurance working for Apple, but yeah, ridiculous. And the other thing is, healthcare is great elsewhere. I mean, this child that is now walking behind me decided to test the hospital care in Thailand. And he was overnight in the nicest hospital we've ever been in. And our friends were freaking out that he would be sick in Thailand. Oh my gosh, he's probably going to die with the terrible medical care. I'm like, this hospital is better than anyone we've ever been to in the States.
Yeah, they have really good, most doctors are...
The whole bill was $300, for overnight.
Yeah, that's crazy. We were, my daughter got her finger bit by some kind of exotic cockatiel in Panama. And it was Saturday evening, and we had to go to the emergency clinic, and the doctor spoke English and saw her and did everything he needed to do, and then we got antibiotics and pain pills and all these things. And when I went to check out, it was $4.75.
Yeah.
including the medicines. And they looked at me. They gave me the evil eye because all I had was a 20. They're just like, "Oh, make me make change for a 20." I'm like, "Sorry, I didn't know."
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's probably one of the things that I would most like to be able to communicate people is that your assumption that the rest of the world isn't somehow at a lower class in terms of healthcare or education or any of these things is an assumption that you shouldn't make, because lots of places are much more put together than you expect them to be.
Yeah, I think in the U.S. There's this image. When I was buying property out of the U.S. and I was like, I would never do that. That's too risky. And that was the whole thing I heard. They thought I was just being reckless with my finances and things. I'm like, no, I think this is a good thing. And once you leave, you realize, they got the same stuff there that we have here. It's different. Not,
And I mean, there are places where there was no suture kit in the whole hospital, so the take-home message was, we now carry one. Not because I would stitch the kid up, but because I would want to be able to hand a clean needle to somebody.
Here you go.
It's just, exactly. So there's things like that. Stuff happens that's not so great, but overall, our experience has been wonderful. We've not ever had any kind of medical emergency that couldn't be taken care of, nor do I know anybody who has had a medical experience that they couldn't take care of. Even my friend Theodora with their lovely airlift this week, which has not been fun for them.
No.
They've got the insurance, the services were there. They got Zach to Hong Kong and they fixed him.
It'll all be fine. It'll be a great story.
Yeah, well, he's already telling it as a great story. He's 12, so this is a major badge for him.
Yeah, pin that one right on there.
That's right.
So culturally, you guys have had a chance, and the kids too, to experience, obviously the U.S. and then Latin American culture for a while. Then you had European, and now you're in New Zealand. What cultural lessons have you learned about the different areas? Is that a pretty broad question, but
the biggest cultural lesson we've learned is that for our own culture to check our assumptions at the door. And that our particular way of looking at things or thinking about things is not the only way, nor is it the best way. And sometimes the best way to learn is to just be quiet. And instead of, Americans are widely known for pontificating about how to get things done. And quite often we don't have all the facts. And I think the thing that we've learned is that there's always more to learn. That the more we travel, the more we realize what we haven't seen and what we do not know. And that's actually what kind of drives us to continue traveling, is that there is so much more to learn. And we hope that our kids will absorb that. The goal of our travels is to raise kids who are culturally literate and able to step across some of those boundaries of language and religion and race in a way that is compassionate and will allow them, especially in the business world later, to be able to move things forward instead of be stumbling blocks in the way. The whole idea of us versus them that is so prevalent in the Western world right now, especially, is something that our kids are growing up largely without. They've lived in Muslim countries on multiple occasions and been the minority from a racial perspective, from a religious perspective. And I think those are experiences that teach you a lot about yourself, but they also teach you a lot about your place in the world. So I don't know. Maybe that's not the answer you were looking for.
No, that's great. Well, no, that's huge. I think that's even better than what I was looking for, because I think the reason that you do this and the reason that other people watching this video can take away from this is that it's not just something. It's not a selfish thing to go moving abroad because you want to go and hang out at the beach, and it's actually a gift. It's actually a gift to your kids, and it's as the world becomes more interconnected, it's going to be more and more important. And I was reading in a book last night. I was reading Abundance, this great book. And he was just mentioning that the kindergartners today, and I happen to have a kindergartner, are going to be retiring in the year 2070.
Wow.
And to think about, okay, it's kind of expands your mind. What kind of things do you need to know to be a successful business person or have a successful life in 2060, 2050? It's not reading, writing, arithmetic. Yeah, and so the best things you can prepare them for is critical thinking and problem solving, and certainly traveling abroad with your children is going to teach you those skills and teach them those skills in a real world kind of way.
Well, and then that's been our whole rap from the beginning with their homeschooling and doing things the way we're doing, is that as a teacher I realize that there are things that you absolutely cannot learn in a classroom with 4 walls with 20 other people exactly your same age in central Idaho for 12 years. You just can't. And that's not a commentary or a criticism on the school system or the teachers at all. It's just a fact of that particular mode of education. And for our family, we've decided that the way we will address those issues is by just taking our kids on a long walk. You don't need to have a whole lot of cultural diversity lessons or prefabbed sort of sensitivity type trainings when you spend your life walking through places that are not home for you. A lot of those things are just learned by osmosis without a lot of I don't know, over talking, I guess.
Yeah. It's not a thing that you can read about in a book and read. Okay, the cultural differences of Guatemala is here. You have to get it internally, like in your soul, as it were.
Yeah, and the best way to do that, I think, with children is just to allow them to play, just to put them in situations where they can play with other people, with other kids, with other grown-ups, with other travelers. And every single person we encounter, every single one, has a lesson to teach our children. I'm not their teacher. That would be an incredibly arrogant place to stand. I wouldn't want that kind of responsibility. The world is their teacher. And 1,000 different people that we've interacted with in the last year are their teachers. And the lessons that they can teach are lessons that I could never teach because I've not walked their paths.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we do when our kids turn 13 is we put together a life book for them where we invite people who've been important in their lives to write them letters on the essence of life and manhood and, growing into a young adult. And we're starting to get letters sent for Elisha, who turns 13 later in this month. And some of the letters that are coming in from people that are just not folks that we expected to respond. A man in Sweden who we fed 3 dinners to in Guatemala wrote him just a really intelligent, thoughtful, kind letter that I posted on our website, actually, if you're interested in reading it. About the meaning of life and what it is to be a man and what to expect as he grows up and the importance of his place in the universe. And this is a guy that we literally picked up on a boat in Guatemala, fed him 3 meals, and sent him on his merry way. And that kind of depth and presence in our kids' lives is why we're traveling.
Yeah, he's sharing his wisdom, and that's something that you would never find in a public school system, or not never, but pretty rare.
You wouldn't find this guy. He's just somebody that you just pick up. We picked up a guy hitchhiking 3 weeks ago who is a microbiologist who gave me a whole dissertation on the protein breakdown per penny for chickpeas and why they were such a good food to eat. And a month later, he sent us an email when we were in Auckland and invited us to go spend an evening at a concert at the home of a knight, like Knight of the Realm knight.
Real deal.
And then the knight invited us back for dinner 3 days later. And so we spent 2 days in the home of this guy who's a fantastic philanthropist and art collector and just an amazing man, all because we picked up a hitchhiker. Those are the kinds of things that you just think, wow, how does that happen? How do you replace that in somebody's education?
Yeah, just tons and tons of stories.
Yeah.
One of the things, I guess your oldest is 17 now, you said, right?
Yeah, she will be next month. This month now, I guess. 3 weeks.
So you're starting to approach the period when some of your family members are going to peel off and do their own thing. Have you thought about?
She could go anytime. Yep.
How is she thinking about doing university in a?
Oh, that's not a question. It's not an optional thing in our family. They will all get their university educations, and we will pay for that. That's part of our family legacy. She's working on that now through Oregon State University. She'll transfer those credits when she gets ready to go bodily somewhere. I wasn't going to send a 15-year-old to a university for some pretty obvious social reasons.
Absolutely.
But since her brain was ready, she started on the work. And we've had those conversations with her. She knows she can go anytime she wants at this point. The last time we talked about it, which was maybe 3 weeks ago, she was saying that she thought she would probably hang around for another 1.5 years or so because she likes what we're doing and she's interested in seeing the things that we're seeing, and she realizes that it's not compromising her education at all. She can continue doing that. And in the meantime, she also works. She does some freelance writing online. She's got a book contract that she's working on right now with a company in the States that's marketed into the juvenile fiction category. And so, they're working on things. They're doing the things they're interested in. Our son, who's 15, we've just started working with him, saving towards a sailboat. We're going to spend a couple of years probably sailing for his benefit because it's his dream to sail around the world like my brother did.
Wow, yeah,
so
I saw that on your...
As a family, that's our next goal.
That's huge. That's one of the ones we've been throwing around, too. I was talking to my kids the other day. I said, how'd you like to spend a little time on a sailboat? They seem kind of interested. We've been looking at lots of different options. We've been back here for 2 years now, so
So you're ready.
Yeah, I mean, I'm already. My wife more wanted to come back and be back here, and but now that we're here, I mean, it's great. But at the same time, I think she's gotten the bug a little bit too. She's like, I see little hints coming up here now and then. Like, well, Spain would be kind of cool,
Spain would be kind of cool.
So it'll be interesting to see how things develop for us, going forward.
Yeah. Well, as the kids get older and they develop their own passions, that becomes part of the party too. Who knows who you've got? They might be passionate sailors.
Yeah, exactly. Who knows? Well, I want to appreciate your time. This is a great interview. I hope this will help some folks out and give them some inspiration. And I hope they'll check out adventureproject.com.
Thanks so much for having me.
Cool. Yeah, absolutely. Have a great day.
You too.
Bye.